In this tutorial, I'm going to go over the space switching options in this Freeform animation toolset or rigging toolset. The toolset kind of has one system that manages all of its space switching, and there's two different ways to interact with it as an animator. The first is to just do a direct bake back and forth from one space and then back to your controller, and then into another space and back to the controller, and then modify your curves in the space that you want, and then move it back to whatever. You just kind of move it spaces, modify your curves in that space, and then move it to a new space, modify those curves, and repeat as much as you need. The second one is more of your traditional, I have a list of spaces that I can switch it to, and I can key that switch across the timeline. So I will show you both of those here. First, let's go ahead and turn this into an IK arm. Let's create a cube as our space. Let's say I've got this cube. It's hovering through the air a little bit, and I want to place his hand on it and have it follow along, and then pull his hand off of it halfway through the animation. First thing, I'm just going to delete the keys that are holding that hand in place where it's at. Give it general placement on the box. Call that good. I'll select the box, select the hand. Before I switch this, kind of go over the different buttons and what they do. So we have a root space overdriver, which will take whatever objects you have selected and put them into the root space of the character. That's kind of essentially our world space. It kind of disconnects it from the rest of the rig and then allows you to animate it freely without any kind of connection, and then bring it back to its parenting hierarchy. And the second one here is multiple overdrivers. This would be if I want this box to control both the hand and the clavicle and the pull vector. I can use multiple overdriver. This is one driving object to a bunch of controls. The overdriver button under that is a bunch of scene objects or controls that will drive a single object or control. So if I wanted this box and this left arm and the cog to all drive this hand, I'll be using overdriver. And then there's a translation overdriver and a rotate only overdriver. I'll show you those on top of this just after we do this hand stuff. So we'll select the cube, select the hand, then do overdriver. First thing you may notice here is that it doesn't look like it actually is following the cube anymore, or at all. It's just staying in place, and that's just how the system works. Whenever we switch space, move anything around in this rig, I don't want to modify your animation. So I'm baking essentially this hand's offset relative to its new space. So you'll see the translate Y on this guy is actually animating up away from the cube as the cube is animating down in order to hold itself exactly where it's at. If I want it to follow the cube, all I have to do is delete these keys. Now it follows along. Let me drag the cube down a little bit too far so we can bring it back up. I got a nice little floating cube with his hand resting on it. Whenever we're happy with that, we can bake it back. Now we no longer have that relationship to the cube, but we do have all the animation that relationship created. Let's say if I want to pull his hand away from it now, I can just delete a bunch of the keys. Start doing my animation offset from there. Now, if we wanted multiple objects driving this hand all at the same time with the ability to key the switch in between, let's go ahead and create multiple objects here. Select each one of them. Same buttons in the UI, same process, except instead of just the one space, it's going to create as many spaces as you give it. Create the overdriver. Again, we still have the same animation. It defaults your space to the first object you had selected, so we'll actually be reconnected to this first box. The second box isn't able to control anything just yet. That's where the space switching tool comes into play. The first time I open this UI in Maya, for some reason it closes itself. You just open it again, it'll pop up and it'll always open again just fine. It's kind of like the first time you run it in Maya kind of issue that I haven't been able to track on. So this UI is saying I'm currently in the space of PQ1. This is the space that I want to move to. Then over what frame range and whether or not to key that or just to switch it myself. So I'm going to say I want to be in PQ space up until like frame 20, frame 21 to 40. Let's be in world space. And maybe frame 41 to 60. Let's be in PQ space, or in PQ2 space. You can see as I move the timeline, the UI is updating to let you know what space we're in on what frame. You can see that after frame 40, PQ2 is our controlling object. Before frame 20, PQ1 is our controlling object. And in between, neither have any control over the hand. If you look at the graph editor of this, you actually see on that one object we have unique curves for each one of those time spaces of how the animation is being applied there. So now we could grab this guy, animate him up. Whatever you want to do with those tools. The next one we'll look at is translate, rotate, overdrivers. On the translate one, I haven't seen a whole lot of use for. I just made it because it's kind of a relationship to the rotate one. The rotate overdriver is what you'd normally do if you want the head to keep its facing direction, no matter what the body is doing. So we can give it a control object. So now it stays steady with the rest of the body as you'd expect with an FK relationship when I'm moving the cog of the character. If I move the spine, we actually keep the head rotated exactly as it is. So you can set that kind of facing of where you want your character to look. He'll always stay looking in that direction. Anytime we can remove these overdrivers. We've got new curves in its default space that define all that motion that we set up. We have these nice clean curves now rather than the curves jumping around. And we could continue to edit off of this. And finally, these two buttons are kind of quick application of overdrivers to objects that are the parent or the children of what you have selected. call them pin and unpin. So if I wanted to modify the rotation of the spine, but I don't want to break, or maybe just even the translation of something in the spine, but I don't want to have to recounter or counter animate my hand placement. I've already got my hand placed where I want it, like on his hand, sorry. So I've got the hand kind of where I want it on his hip there. I don't want to break that relationship while I'm modifying my torso. The pin button looks at the skeletal joint that we're controlling. So in this case, the top spine joint finds all of the children joints, so like the clavicles and that first neck joint, and puts them into world space, or character root space technically. Character root space, as far as our characters are concerned, are this top group node that you see in the scene. It's kind of their world space, the character's world. This guy. So now that these overdrivers are applied, I can move my spine however I want, make adjustments, kind of manage those details of his breathing or whatever other motion I need through here. If I don't like that he's puffing his chest out quite so much, I grab these guys. Throw them on later. Ooh. Bring it back. Whatever changes you want to make. None of this will affect the rest of the body, since these are now being evaluated in world space essentially. So it doesn't matter, it kind of breaks the hierarchy of the rig here. And then when we're done working on that, select that joint again, or that controller, remove all, so unpin, and it bakes all of our children back into the space with all the new animation offsets that we created. And that is the overdriver space switching system. It's kind of the core of how this whole rigging system works. You saw when we set this character up that it creates the relationship between our rigging components. It also handles animation tooling, so you can switch whatever you want into whatever space you want at any time, kind of freely to do that at any point in any animation. So you're not constrained by how a rig is set up to get your animation how you want.